Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the session. Let's get started. So first of all, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Medhat Nasr. He graduated from Cairo University in Egypt, in Giza. He earned his PhD studies in entomology from University of California in US. And he was Alberta provincial apiculturist for 18 years. Now he's retired. And he was also the president of the Canadian Association of Professional Apiculturists from 2014 to 2018. Apart from being in charge of the bee imports committee to Canada for over 12 years, and it's still part of the Saskatchewan Bee Tax Adoption and Applied Research Program lead from 2020. So a long experience. Medhat has spent decades in developing alternatives for mite control, evaluating integrated pest management strategies that he will share with us, and selection and breeding quality bees. He's currently working on developing new miticides for varroa mites. He's member of the Honeybee Health Coalition in US, and he has received numerous awards from his contributions to apiculture in Canada and in US. So thank you very much, Medhat, for joining us, for taking the time to be with us. We are pretty happy to have you on board.
Thank you, Miguel, and I appreciate the opportunity to be part of your educational program. And I'm really quite pleased to see V2 Pharma start this Bee Tuned and inviting different speakers to share their experience and expertise with our audience across the world. Good day, everybody. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon here in Saskatchewan. And I'm sure it's different time in different locations based on where you are at. And just to let you know, I've been around this bee business for about 53 years, starting in Egypt. And then in 1979, I moved to the United States, stayed there for 10 years. Then I moved up to Canada. And after that, I've been between Canada and the United States. Through my career, I've seen a lot of changes in beekeeping industry. And before coming actually to the United States, I started practicing bees and doing research since 1972. So I experienced the first introduction and finding of trichial mite in Egypt. Then when I moved to the United States by 1984, I witnessed also the trichial mite invasion to the United States and later on moved into Canada. 1986, varroa mites started in the United States, and by 1990, it moved to Canada. Then a small hive beetle and whatever is happening since that time. So with all of these changes, I felt all my career, it's already centered around mites. So even though all my studies were on queens, physiology, and breeding, but later on, because of the job and my mandates, I start working on mites, trichial mites first, and for the last 30 years, I've been dealing with varroa mites. So for this talk, I would like to share, as part of this adaptive beekeeping strategies, we have to understand our subject here, and that's the bee biology and the management challenges. Different from any animals we've been dealing with, the honeybees always live in clusters controlled by the queens, and they're always a different way of their biology, which we should consider all the time as we are talking about beekeeping and the adaptation through the time to face the challenges happening to honeybees. The second part, I'm going to talk about the advanced techniques which is being developed to be used in the hives and what kind of challenges also we are having. And the data which we have to develop to make decisions and how to make the proper decision and adapt it and apply it at the right time. So these are the 4 points which I am going to address today. And as I said, this is basically a conversation with audience who've been around the bees, and I'm sure they have more experience every day, and they learn more and more about what's happening in the industry. So if we look at the beehives, you notice here all of these different stages and the bees. Uh, as I said, that's a big unit. When we deal with the cow herd, each cow it has different, as an animal, it's separate. However, with the hives here, it looks like the whole unit is considered like a cow or a horse or, uh, a dog or cat. But we have, so far, we've been dealing with the bees as one single hive at the time. However, that kind of understanding of bee management is not a management of a single hive, which it has uh, a queen and several thousand of the workers and several hundred of drones. However, we have to deal with separate units, which we call it hives, in an operation, and each one it should be managed according to the status of that bee colony, which we see during the time when we inspect the bees. Within the hive itself, we have the structure of the colony of several thousand workers, some of them related to each other because more than others, some of them coming from the same father, same mother. But in reality, the queen will mate with more than 20, on the average, 20 drones. So we have 20 subfamilies. Workers coming from the same father and same mother, they become super sister and they act together. However, each family is related to the other one. It's in halfway because they share the same mother, but they are coming from different fathers. Within that colony, the queen will rule the whole function, and actually, the bees will get their order from the queen in terms of how to, what kind of jobs do they have to do, and how to organize themselves to maintain the colony alive and maintain the needs of the queen to lay more eggs and continue developing the population inside the hives. That structure is being controlled under the queens, and we have different ways of understanding how that will be working, mainly through the communication between the queens and workers through pheromones, and we have some other communication in terms of the dancing and other and so forth. But that structure has to be maintained all the time to stay healthy, and they are able to manage and survive the situation. Three variables or three factors actually control the whole thing. The environment, the environment that will include the crops and the feed outside. It includes the environment inside the hive in terms of healthy and non-healthy. Do the bees they have diseases or not? The second thing, the climate, which it controlled the hive activities, and they controlled also the crop production and the flowering and the forage. So the climate here will also become a part of regulating the bee activities. In terms of the beekeeper, he is a guy who has the knowledge to manage those hives according to what he has in terms of the seasonality, preparing the bees to get the crop, preparing the bees to survive the winter, making sure the bees stay healthy through the whole life by inspecting them and looking after them. So we have to keep in mind the beekeeper here, when we say a colony failed, it is not failed because it's part of her life. No. The colony will always strive to survive as long as they are healthy and led by healthy queens, and there's enough food and there is no disease. Whatever is there is a shortage in the colony survivorship, who has to make up for that? That's when we say the beekeepers has to intervene and take some measurements and management action to make sure this colony will survive. So, looking at the three variables here, the bee activities, the climate, and the environment, that will create the seasonality where the bees, where and how the bees will develop in each location. Like currently, in where I live here in Saskatchewan, right now we are in the middle of the season in July. In some areas right now, there is no such forage, and the bees actually during this time of the year are wintering. It's like down under in Australia, New Zealand, and this part of the world. But for us here, we are in the peak of honey production at this time. If you look at the picture on the right-hand side in the top one, this picture was taken actually last Friday from a bee yard. You can find each hive. It has 6 or 7 standard boxes in preparation of collecting the honey. The average honey production here, it's about 200 pounds, about 100 kilograms, and that happens and collected and stored in the hive within actually 4 weeks in the whole year. So from July 15th all the way to August 15th, that's where the honey season comes in. Later on, we prepare our winter, and that's how this is kind of a structure of colony development and population. It will be different from one location to other. Even within Canada here, Western Canada is different from Eastern Canada. Can you imagine somebody else in some other parts of the world? It's going to be entirely different. So we have to consider this one when we manage our bees to know exactly what kind of practices and management practices can be done to prepare the bees for the season itself. In the United States, actually, according to NASA, they have this map, and this is a website you can access it at any time, and it will give you every region around the North America. And once you click on that map, you will find exactly what kind of seasonality, what kind of flowers available for the bees at different times of the year. This is very practical, and any person who is not familiar with his own location, they can access this map. They call it Honey Bee Net, and just Google NASA Honey Bee Net, and that will take you into this map. Very simple and easy, but it provides a lot of practical information about the flowering season and what's out in your region at any time of the year. So I always call, and the bees, even though we think about, we can understand them and we can manage them. However, at the end of the day, yes, bees can respond to your own management, but they have their own mind. And we have to adjust our management on the fly to make sure our management, it meets the bee behavior and social activity and the seasonality where we are at. So the hive acts as one individual making their own decision. If you have more than one hive, I'm sure each one will be different. They might share the same kind of conditions, but some of them, they vary from the others. That's where we have to have the proper action based on what we see in each hive. And this is really quite important. As we do research and we make recommendations, we have to consider this in all of our research and recommendations. One size does not fit all. And that's where we have to make sure our beekeepers understand that concept and manage their colonies based on that. So just to go into a deep little bit into our hives and see how many variables it can impact the activity of the honeybees and how it is challenging for the beekeepers to accept and look after all of these ones. You see here in this slide, the beekeeper right in the center, because I always consider he is the one responsible for managing and leading the bees to do exactly what he wants them to do at the proper time of the year. He is the one responsible for making sure those bees are healthy. In this slide, if you look at the right side, you can find the climate, which we already talked about, the planting season, and the timing of the year, and the wintering, and the bee cycle. All of this should be understood as part of the colony development. If we look at the pests and diseases, and that varies from location to location and from time of the year to another, and those ones they have to be monitored and controlled. The beekeeping practices that will have to be managing, it had to be managed and accepted based on what the hive dictate and the climate and the environment dictate. On the other side, flowers and crops and plants, that's really controlled by the farmers if we are working in agriculture area. If you are in natural areas, that's controlled by the environment. For the crops and the agricultural land, that's where most of the honey crop comes, especially in my part of the world. Other parts of the world, they rely on forest and other kind of cropping system or natural sources. That's not really in my part here in the country, and especially in Western Canada. Uh, Farming change over time, and we hear this a lot. For example, uh, 30 years ago, the major crop for the bees to forage on around the summer time of the year, summertime, it used to be clover. With the industry, canola industry has come and it became more profitable to the farmers to grow canola. In Western Canada alone, we grow about 22 million acres. That's about 15 million hectares of canola. That tells you almost 80% of our honey crops come from one single crop. So the challenge here, the bees, it no longer having the luxury to have different varieties to feed on, but they have only one monocrop, one single crop to forage on, to develop on, and make crop out of that. Not only that, our honey comes from the canola as and crystallized within short time. And that kind of honey is not really acceptable for the bees to winter on that. So that's another challenge for the beekeepers they have to consider. Pesticide, that's another issue. And that comes with communication between the farmer and the beekeeper, how to protect the bees, and the farmer at the same time allowed to use his pesticide to protect his crop. This is matter of communication. Um, so the food supply as a result of the agriculture activities and the beekeeping activities completely change, and the beekeeping industry has to adjust to that either by having feed supplement or moving the bees into areas where they have additional food. So after all, as I said, the only person responsible for bee development and productivity and health is the beekeeper. That's why it's quite important for the beekeeper to have the knowledge and the experience how to do that. I am going to move into, since we are talking about this integrated, adaptive beekeeping, we have to adapt our management to what we see out in the field, especially with the recent pest. It came over and actually it became major part of our management, how to keep the bees healthy. With the advances about the monitoring, I've been really like when Miguel asked me to give this kind of talk, I kept thinking, what really changed over the years in my 53 years of bees? We still are using the same hive tool and we are using the same smoker. So that's the major tools we use actually, in addition to the extractor and so forth. Actually, I found a picture uh, in the internet. It comes actually during the ancient Egyptian time. These are the kind of people who first kept the honeybees and they learned about the bees several thousand years ago. And you notice that lady here, this is just as recent as maybe 50 or 60 years ago. She is actually trying to use the hive tool. It was a long piece of metal. At the end, it have a sharp edge, and that's to collect the honey from the hive, which she's sitting around. So I was really wondering what really would change. Actually, just to make we developed the tools which been used for hundreds of years into more modern tool to help us to carry on with our management. And since the production and the beekeeping operation start to increase in size, we have some operation, they have 5,000 hives, others they have 12,000 hives. And on the average in this part of the country, in Western Canada, an average commercial beekeeper will have 2,200 hives. That's a lot. That's why we found more advances in the extraction system to speed up the extraction of honey. That's all what we have happened. At the same time, if I look around to the farming community, we can find more tools developed over the last 50 years to manage this monoculture and large farming. Even right now, we have what we call it precision agriculture. All of this kind of tractors already provided with computers to provide information to the farmers that help him to improve his management system. Do we have the same thing in the honeybees? Not really. If we look around for the animal health or human health, we can find several technologies developed for diagnosis and monitoring. And that's been really developed so fast in the recent years. We moved from the X-rays all the way to develop the scanning and to the genome analysis and finding exactly what's happening out in the field or a person for diseases and so forth. And based on that, we can develop the vaccine to help everybody. Have we done that for the honeybees? Some of these technologies, especially the recent one about the genome analysis, virus analysis, diagnostic of the bee diseases like the eczema under the microscope and so forth, it's happening, but it's very limited. It can happen in the lab, it can be used in research, and we have better understanding to the diseases at this time. But to become a tool and the beekeeper will demand it or take some samples and send it to the lab to test, it's going to cost him for sample analysis from $50 to $200 if he wants to know exactly what kind of virus and what virus level it's in beehives or in a sick colony. But that's very seldom happen. The key point here, as long as a kilogram of honey is $5 or the cost of honey or honey sales at this time, $2 a pound, that beekeeper will never make enough money to send his sample to the lab to do the testing. Think about it. If you have one cow sick Yes, you can draw a blood sample, the veterinarian, and he will give you the test results, and you can take care of that cow because that cow it's worth $1,000. However, for us to send a sample and it costs you $200, I may as well, if this colony died, I replace it with a package piece or split to replace it. So this is where the gap is coming. There's technology available, but making it attainable to the beekeeper to spend money, and try to test his bees, it's not here yet. That gap has to be reduced so we can advance our monitoring system for the bees. The current one right now, this is like even one picture to show the AI. We start using it to help us for scanning and monitoring diseases in animals and human. Can it be used for honeybees? Absolutely can be done. But it's so primitive at this time. And as I said, it costs money to do that. Uh, this apiary in this slide, I call it the dream apiary. And I get some proposals suggesting, yes, we can put uh, telecommunication in each hive, and it goes through the internet and the cloud and come to myself, so I can actually develop some management system for the bees out in the field. So far, there is no enough tools to do the job, and actually it can replace the direct examination and monitoring of the diseases by the beekeepers. And the question comes all the time, how many hives I can monitor so I can get the data enough to give me a good picture what's happening in my operation or in my bee yard so I can take care of that. That kind of technology, even though it is so uh, primitive, we don't have enough of it to help us to manage and monitor our diseases using this kind of advanced technology. And as I said, cost benefit. It's going to cost me too much. I cannot really afford it. Then I have to settle with what I have and try to improve my skills to do that in a proper way. As I mentioned early on, in the beginning of this conversation, most of these diseases we were quite uh, experienced and learned about it through our education, either in schooling or practice out in the field, until varroa mites came actually in Europe in the late 70s, and they came out to the North America in mid 80s. And since the time, the whole picture about beekeeping completely changed. And why is that? First of all, we were always concerned about farmers using pesticide out in the field and how they kill the honeybees. Right now, we have become also farmers. We are using actually the pesticide in our hives to save the bees, to kill the mites. But even our challenge is more and more because we have to use a pesticide safe for the bees. It can affect and kill the mites, and actually it is safe for the honey product, which uh, humans will consume it. So our challenge here is becoming serious. In addition to that, as beekeepers, we never were trained and we don't have the experience in our training system how to monitor and what kind of decision to be made at the time. So that's the kind of stuff we struggled with it for a while, and now we start to have a better experience how to manage this mite, relatively speaking, in a better way. Going back with the mites and examination and monitoring and the other bee diseases. In fact, at this time, the most important tool we can use is examining the hives during the season by trained beekeepers. They have early diagnosis. They can use other tools to confirm, or they can use the available resources like the regulators or experts out there to confirm the disease and provide some help in terms of recommendation. How can we do that? Nothing to replace the visual inspection of the combs. In terms foul brood, the chalk brood, viruses, varroa mites, we are going to talk about how to monitor that. So all of this kind of examination mostly relies in the visual examination and recording. This is an old real tool. Once we start having the eczema as a disease in bee colonies, finally we got the beekeepers to own some microscopes, or they have access to laboratories to send some samples to monitor for eczema spores and give them the count as soon as they can, so that way they can trigger some management actions. For American foul brood, the most important part actually, as you notice in the left side here of the slide, it's examining the combs and using the roughness test. They confirm if it is true or not. If you still have some doubts, Vita Bee Health has another kit. You can also use it for testing, or send a sample to a lab to do the testing. Based on the results, you can trigger some actions. This is kind of the two classic diseases before the varroa mites came. Once the varroa mites came, as I said, it has changed our perspective about bee management and what kind of actions we should take. As I said, it's scary. And at the beginning, and still now, even after 30 years of experience with mites, it sometimes creates some nightmares for every beekeeper. That's basically because the concern, if it gets out of control, actually the consequences are quite serious and the colony will be killed. So we have to pay attention to that. At the beginning, once the varroa mites came in 1986, the easy way to do this, find the mites, either you see them by your eyes on the bees, and at the time it was quite too late to treat the colonies because the infestation would close quite high. One simple thing we start using, actually, we start getting a jar, and we have fluid starter for cars, which is ether, and we spray it inside the jar, and later on we roll the bees and the jar together, and the mites will stick to the body of the jar. It was simple, easy way to find the mites, but quantitative to know exactly how many mites are there, it was always so variable. So it does not give me robust numbers, which basically helps me to make the decision to treat or not to treat. The other one, which everybody's familiar with, you can use a fork, uncapping fork, and stick it in the frames and try to pull out some pupa, and you will see the mites there. Still, it's yes or no. It doesn't matter at the time how many mites you find, because by the time, this is not actually accurate way of finding the mite infestation level in the hive. Then actually at certain time, we start taking a sample of bees, and later on it was determined by research, 300 bees, it can give you accuracy about 95% of presentation of the hive, the population in the hive. And we start using the a sieve and wash the sample with water, or we can wash it actually with winter windshield washer, especially in our part of the country, we have minus 45 Celsius. That has a lot of propanol alcohol, and that helps to dislodge the mites from the bees. And we collect the mites on cheesecloths, as you notice in the slide in the center here. And we later on, we count the mites. You notice here, we have 3, 4, 5, 6 mites. You know how long it took us to do this kind of sample processing? Each time it takes us about 15 minutes to do the job. So, as a beekeeper, how many times should I do that? And how many times should I monitor through the years to find out about my mite level? In fact, I don't recall any beekeeper use this method. Most of us, we use it either for regulation or research. Regulation because if a hive moved from one location to another location, we have to make sure the mite level either 0 or less than 1%. So that's the only time we were forced to do it to meet some regulation. But later on, as we kept moving ahead, we actually brought the sample into the lab and start using shaker instead of washing it with a sieve. And after that, wash it in the sink and collect the mites. As you notice here, we can see some drops here of the mites here. That sample also, it takes actually 20 minutes to process one single sample to find the counting of mites, and later on we can calculate what is the percentage of infestation in a bee colony. One of the things developed at the time, actually in early 90s, a screen bottom board. We used to put this one under the hive and leave it there for 3 days and count the dropped mites, which naturally dropped, and that can give us indication how many mites inside the hive. And based on that, we start to have, I would say, the adoption of first step in integrated pest management. Now, I know what I am monitoring is for all mites. I know the mite level at this time. Then the question becomes, at what threshold I should treat my hive? And that's where we become closer and closer to the pest management of any crops, which is being done over the years, and the farmers and the farm advisors learn about it before us. So we start adopting this kind of strategy from the farming community and apply it in our colonies. This happened actually until at the time when I was in Alberta in 2005 or six, actually, yeah. And we were doing some regulation and inspecting hives, and I have few inspectors, and we were doing the swatching using the sieve and cheesecloths and big pail and washing all the samples in the field. It was taking so long. Then at the time, we are up in the Peace River, that's northern Alberta, and actually there is no sunset. It might be between midnight until 2 o'clock in the morning and sunrise again. So at the time, you start thinking, yes, no enough sleep or good sleep, and you start thinking, how can we speed up this process? It happened. That's the time actually in the fall when you see all the stores stacked with mason jars for helping the families to supply the families with mason jars to store some of the fruits and vegetables and so forth for the winter. So actually at the time, I said, why not we get two mason jars, as you notice here in the left side, and put one screen right on the top of one of them, get the other one and invert it and use duct tape around. That really came the birth of that, what we call a double-headed jar for Varroa shaker. To me, That was the most important thing I ever made in my career. Actually, we were so excited. We got our samples, shake the samples for about 90 seconds, flip the jar upside down, and you start counting the mites. And we found out 1 inch in the bottom of the jar, it's about 300 bees. So that was the story about the beginning of having the Varroa shaker, which been spread around the whole world, and everybody claimed they invented it. That's great. I don't mind at all. But the whole idea, I always give actually the Peace River in Alberta and McDonald, where we had breakfast at the time, for coming up with this kind of simple little tool which helped the industry across the world. You not see actually this picture, as I said, we were in a backyard last Friday, and here one of my helpers is collecting the samples. We get the sample and start shaking the jar, and right away we know how many mites are there. Guess what? To verify this process, we collected samples from the field, and we start looking for the threshold. But by the end, you notice in the bottom of this slide here on the right-hand side, I always say, just if you count 7 mites with the correction factor, that's 9 mites. And if you have any number between 250 mites to 325 mites, actually that's 3%. And that became the threshold for treatment. And I'm not going to go into all the details about how we determine the threshold of treatment. And you notice my helper here. Actually, he was retired professor from one of the universities. He was quite interested in doing research, and he came and helped me to do this kind of stuff. And the most interesting part, that time to verify this test, we took 1,590 samples from the field, and we shook them using the shaker for 20 minutes, which a very detailed way. And we calculated the mites based on the hand shaker and the mites based on the lab shaker. And you can notice here with 1,590 samples, we have almost 90% accuracy. So that really gave us more definite ideas about why should we change our system and try to use a simple tool like that shaker. And that helps us to monitor the mite and give us infestation level, and they become a basics for making decision to treat or not to treat. Uh, Recently, you find different variations, and I understand B2 Pharma came up with the Easy Check, which basically similar ideas, and they can count the mites. There's some group out there, they love to use the icing sugar because they were so concerned about killing 300 bees to determine if where is the mite level or what is the mite infestation level. I always give an example in myself. I When I see my doctor and they say go to the lab test and go to the lab and they draw some blood out of me, and we have blood donors every time. Nobody dies from that. If my colony cannot support having 300 bees to kill them to find out what is the mite level, I think that's a problem. However, we are doing it for good reason. With the ice and sugar, there's some pros and some cons for it. And actually, most of my beekeepers right now, when we ask them, what are you using for doing that? We are using the alcohol shake, and that gives robust numbers to make proper decision. And that's why we always encourage beekeepers to do the proper way to determine the mite level, because we are making serious decision to treat or not to treat based on that. Uh, Talking about the new technology, how can we adapt the new technology to help us to speed up the process? This is one, I got it recently as a recent paper, and it shows we can use actually the a scan to look at the mites on screen bottom board. Keep in mind that helps us to scan and count the mites. However, I have to go to the field and install the sticky board. Right now, the sticky board about $67 and leave it for 3 days, second trip, and come back and start doing that. I always say it is not really too practical. It's too expensive for the beekeeper to go the field 2 times to determine the mite level. However, the shaker, it's easier. The second thing here, if we found in a sticky board, if I am using it, and I find more than 10 mites per day, I don't have to count the rest of the mites because that's my threshold. 10 natural, 10 mite drop per day, that's my threshold using the sticky board. However, as I said, there's pros and cons. Expensive, it takes two trips. You have to leave it for 3 days and count and carry on. But the simple, easy way, we actually trying to encourage every beekeeper to use the alcohol wash. And not only that, after using the pesticide, we were facing some challenging, and how we are going to monitor that. The mites develop resistance to some used miticides in the hive. So how did you determine that? Actually, the first test it was developed by Jeff Pettis from USDA, and he exposed the bees and mites into the strips here and for 24 hours. And later on, he counted how many mites survived and how many mites killed. And based on that, we can determine the efficacy of the pesticide. In other words, we can determine the resistance. It worked nicely until about 3 or 4 years ago. There's another variation of this test came out by USDA, and we start using the test. In Spain, actually, they work hard and they develop actually PCR test to find out the genome and the mutation of that resistance, and they can give you the results. So we are moving ahead to continue adopting some of the technologies in our management. But my concern is still, if it's too expensive and take too much time to deliver the data, it will be too late to treat the bees. Our bees, once you find there's it reach the mite level, reach the threshold, you have to treat now. So, as I said again, with all of these technologies, which right now relying actually in few variables to be measured inside the hives, like temperature and moisture and some bee activities, it's still limited, and we have to continue working with the developers, including the bee biologists in the system, and that help to understand how to develop what I call it the dream hives or the smart hives to be used. My concern about the smart hive to be used, if I have a beekeeper with 5,000 hives and you convert them into smart hives, that will become a steep step to move forward, and it might cost a lot of money for that. Going back, if you notice in this hive, in this slide, you will notice one thing. Just I'd like you to look at the hives on the left-hand side. In my time, 99% of the beekeepers, and even still up to now, we are using what I call it the brick language. We put a brick right on the top of the hives, and if the brick is standing, it might mean something. The queen is not there. The brick is facing east or west. All of these kind of things, it used to be just a way to record the information inside hives or inside the bee yard. And we don't have really a piece of paper to write down exactly what's happening. Recently, we start seeing actually as the challenge becoming how to keep the bees healthy, and too many numbers we have to collect and too many hives we have to watch for. We start seeing more and more beekeepers are using now a notebook and writing down the information. As a matter of fact, this is one of the areas also advanced so fast right now. We can see some software available for the beekeepers, and they can use Notepad, and they go outside and start using it to collect the data and information to come back to make decision based on what they see in the field. I am really excited about this kind of part, and seeing more and more beekeepers are becoming what I call it, keeping records, and they can ask the smart question based on the records collected from the field. We are going to move into this transition now into the data collection and making decision based on data. I will give you one example, and this is to shows the powerful of monitoring and having data. Around 2006 and 7, what's so-called colony collapse disorder happened in the United States. We haven't seen it in Canada. But what we've seen at the time, a failure of pesticide or miticide in the hives. When we got our, about 47% of the colonies in Alberta died that year. Definitely, we got more inspectors, and we went out and inspect the bee yards. We inspect 31 operations. That's a total about 150,000 hives. And we took some samples, and we start looking at the mite level at the time. You notice here, actually, 81% of the hive, they have more than 1% mites. 29%, they have nosema above the threshold. And we have actually 20% nosema and varroa mites above the threshold. Only 10% of the colonies are healthy. When we ask the beekeepers, do you know what's happening? No, just this is what I did. The colony is dead. Do you know why? So after we monitored and collected the data and we recorded it, we were able to know exactly why and what happened at the time. Then that's the time we got actually, we developed the recommendation based on what we seen. You have to change your miticide, you have to treat for nosema, you have to follow up with your treatment to make sure it did work. And we went actually back and inspected that 30 or 31 hive, and we added 3 more, 33,000 hive, 33 operations. And you notice here one thing, all of these colors disappeared. All of this color disappeared. And that's because now we know you have to monitor and apply the treatment at the right time. Just in general, you will not hear, as I mentioned, 2007, we have only 10% of the colonies were healthy. About 45% of the colonies dead between here and there. Second year, 7% colonies also healthy. And we have another disaster year, almost again, varroa mites, 58%. And we have nosema and varroa, 14%. So that was another disaster year. For the third year, once we monitor and we made the recommendation and the treatment applied at the right time, we had actually at that time 50%, 56% of the colonies free from mites, and the other 22% out here, actually the other ones, we got at the time 20% of those colonies survived. Our survivorship here, it was 78%. So monitoring, recording, make decision based on the monitoring and what you see. Once you reach the threshold, apply your treatment. So another question comes all the time, which actually right now we are running some research in our tech transfer program about it. What sample size? We always say if you have 1 to 25 hives, sample all of them. and try to get proper information about it so you can make the decision for treatment. You have 40 hives in a yard. I will sample 5 to 10 hives. If you have so many yards, I will use the high risk 5 yards in my operation, which basically adjacent to other beekeepers. So I know exactly what's coming from my neighbors, and based on that, I make my decision. One of the things here also we learn over the years, you don't treat only one hive because the mite level is so high. By the time you come back, the bees will actually drift to other colonies, and we at the time we have what we call it mite bomb, either coming from your own colonies or coming from the neighbors. Whenever you treat your hives, you have to treat all the hives at the same time. Some to bring down the mite infestation, the other ones actually to protect them from further infestation due to drifting of the bees. How many times do you sample? Sample before, sample after. And I will never stop sampling until we make sure the bee is going to the winter in good shape, less than 1% mite infestation. Having the system being developed and applied, actually, we are so excited about the fact if we did, when we do annual surveys to our beekeepers, we are finding almost 90% of our beekeepers right now using the alcohol wash to monitor their mites in their hives. And after they do the treatment, and even during the treatment, they take more samples to ensure the treatment is effective and the mite level is decreasing. I will come to the last point here, strategies to adapt and thrive in changing conditions. Our condition right now is changing so much. For us as beekeepers, the learning curve is quite steep. As I said, all of us, we are trained about bee management and bee biology. However, later on, we have become also pest management people. We have to learn about the system. And I tell you frankly, for all of our training as scientists and others, we were trained how to keep the bees alive, but we never really trained how to apply pesticide, how to monitor, how to make decision. However, we started learning this one over the last 15, 20 years, and we learn from experience or by doing more research to see exactly what works and what doesn't work. The best strategy to adopt in your system and adapt it to your own management is using the IPM, Integrated Pest Management. Our speaker last time was also invited by Vito Pharma, uh, Dr. Cameron Jack. He gave us a good example about the IPM and what kind of tools it can be used inside the hives. And the IPM, as I said, if you look at the left-hand side here, you will find basically identify the problem, keep an eye on the problem and monitor and take action. And after you take action, you have to evaluate to make sure your actions did work, or you need to take another action to help to bring the best level into less than the threshold, the infestation threshold. So all of this kind of steps are integrated to give us the best results to keep our bees. We have several ways of and practices. Already Cameron Jack talked about those practices early on to help us to understand what kind of options we have. I really created this kind of what I call it toolbox. Uh, since the mites came, our focus, in addition to the other technical and mechanical actions or genetics action, because we did not have mite-resistant TBs at the time, we focus on chemical actions. And for the chemical actions, we had several products were available for us. Some of them are not working, and some is still working. And that's Epistan, Comofos, Bivarol, and Epivar. And the other chemical, formic acid, oxalic acid, HubGuard, and Epilife, all of these other products are working. So now for us, we have a toolbox full of supply options, but it is the beekeeper's decision to find out which option can work the best for his operation at certain time of the year. So this is a toolbox. We need to add more into it and to educate our beekeepers. And if there's any genetic material available out there, it's like the recent development by USDA or the recently released lines of pollen to the beekeepers, this one can work and maintain low level of mites. At the same time, I have to be vigilant and still monitor. I take action if it is needed in my operations. For my part of the world in Canada here, that's another thing we have to watch for because we have short season, actually only during the summer months, and in the fall we get right away into the winter time. Most of our treatment for so many years, it used to be focused in the full time. And you notice here from our progression of mite development, that's where the high peak of mites. As we did that, we killed the mites, but the viruses were able to kill the bees at the time because we killed the mites, but we did not have any treatment for virus infection in the bees. That's why by 2008, we learned our lesson and we start moving our treatment into the spring. Once we have it in the spring, we kill varroa mites in the spring and maintain it at a very low level. So our winter bees actually protected from the mite infestation and the virus infestation. That strategy actually help us to maintain healthy bees. And I encourage everybody they focus on managing the bees during the springtime. If the treatment required in the fall time, it should be secondary to help to improve the efficacy of the product being used and protecting the bees during the fall to get into the winter time. So overall, in a nutshell, our management system, it became like a puzzle. We have to have all the pieces together and we have to stack them in a proper way and take the proper decision at the right time so that puzzle will be solved. That comes with education, monitoring, recording, and understanding the tools which we have available for us. Does this system work? And that's why we call it adaptive technology or adaptive management. Actually, in Saskatchewan here, we have a team. It's headed by our provincial apiculturist, myself as a lead of the tech transfer team and doing the science behind that. And we have our specialist in bees and pollination. We work as a team together and try to relay the message to our beekeepers in terms of guiding them how to monitor, take action, and they call at any time 24/7 if they have an issue. And one of the good things actually to give the beekeepers the credit, they are the one monitoring. It's no longer the call to say, I lost my bees, I don't know why. The call which we get right now, two things. I monitor 40 hives in one bee yard, and I found that many hives they have the mite level and the sheet coming with that and sent through text and couple of pictures and say, what can I do at this time? Or this is my options. What do you suggest? This is exciting to see the beekeepers start to get into the mode of having science-based decision. If you look at the last several years, 5 years, Saskatchewan comparing to Alberta, so comparing to Manitoba, you can notice here over the last 5 years, we have 21% colony kill on average. Some years actually went to 13%. Other adjacent provinces, 40%, 49%, 39%. 57%. That's a lot of loss. So this shows the power of extension, adoption, and the power of having the beekeepers doing their job at the right time to protect their own bees. I believe my takeaway message from this talk: bee management is 360 degrees. Look at all your bees with all the aspects: environment, weather, bee colonies, neighbors, and what can happen to your colonies. Varroa matters. See them, kill them, but also don't overdo them by having more and more treatment to get to the last mite. It will never happen. Our tools are effective. Just bring it under the threshold, which is being established as 3%. As a matter of fact, right now we are considering 1% to be the threshold because the virus situation and actually the efficacy of some of the products. Make data-driven decision. There is no guesses, and I already explained the power of having data. Adjust your strategy as on the fly. If you see something, act or request or ask for help to help you to make that decision as fast as you can. A hive without varroa mites is likely a dead hive. Keep in mind, anytime you don't see varroa in your sample, that's because you are missing it, or your sample size, or if you take more samples, you are going to find it. However, we stuck with that. We need to have a stable, a standard method, 300 bees, and watch them. And if you find, as I said, 7 mites, that's 3%. If you find 2 mites, that's 1%. That's all what you need to know. And at this time, I hope this message, it can resonate in your head. Monitor, 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 record, take decision. And if you have any question, contact your regulators or your extension people, and they are always available to give you advice. Thank you so much, and I'd like to thank Vito Pharma for giving me the opportunity to share this information with you. Thanks again.
Well, the pleasure is ours, Medhat. Thanks a lot for your holistic approach, for your takeaways. We will make a very short questions. So I will dig a little bit on the ones we already have. So first question, for example, it's coming from Anthony Antonucci. So can you comment on whether there should be added focus at looking at drones and drone brood when conducting mite tests?
Yes, it's quite interesting, that kind of research. It takes me back to the bee biology. When really we see the drones in the hives. The drones in the hives, actually, when we start, like, for example, here in this part of the world, the brood will start, and once we start getting some pollen in early spring, the drone will show up later on. And if we have mites left in the hive, they will attack the drones and workers. But by the time I collect my samples of drones to find out the mite level in the drones, I am a little bit concerned because we don't have a threshold established based on the drone sampling. All of our research established based on the workers' infestation levels. And the workers all the time will carry the varroa mites in their body. So the worker is constant. However, the drone, it comes and disappear in the fall. And if the drones already, my concern here, if I don't have a threshold to determine exactly what is the damaging level and when the treatment level based on the drones, it's good to know, but we have not have the practical way how to adopt it and make decision based on the drones infestation.
Okay, we have also a question related to the use of CO2 in mite level testing and whether it is accurate and whether the bees actually survive and don't die as they don't do with alcohol washes.
Yes, it can be done. It can be done, and it can survive. But the question is, for myself, as I said, I'm dealing with large-scale beekeepers. How many carbon dioxide pump they're going to carry around to do that? We are finding actually you know, it doesn't matter as long as you are consistent with your applications and having robust numbers, and you can make the decision based on that, it can be done. Carbon dioxide is great. Yes, the bees will survive that. But at the same time, for myself, as a practical guy, all the time, all my career working directly with the beekeepers, what's easy? Carry carbon dioxide pump or carry some, what do you call it, winter windshield washer. And for us, as we know, beekeepers, they have access to this product, especially during the, by the end of the winter, we have a lot of sales in Canada. If you are from other parts of the world, actually, you can use methyl hydrate. It's available in different places. It's cheaper in price, and it can do the job. As long as you're consistent, there is no problem at all. The only problem I have sometimes with the icing sugar is that the bees vegetate, and actually the icing sugar will stick to the bee body and the mites will stick to the bee body. And how much recovery of that mites into that shaking out my sugar and mites, it's about 50%. So we have to have a good correction factor to account for the mites still stuck with the bees.
Okay, we have another question coming from Massachusetts. So you mentioned 10 mites per day on a 3-day drop board count as your treatment threshold. Am I correct to assume that this value is equivalent to the 3% alcohol wash threshold? How did you calibrate the value?
Yes, that's correct. It can actually, this is what we have seen, 3% to 10 mites per day, which basically about 30 mites in 3 days. And as a matter of fact, right now we have funds to revisit and recalculate the economic thresholds based on our experience with beekeepers right now. And we are actually monitoring or comparing 3 systems for counting mice. One with the alcohol wash using the shaker, and the second one using icing sugar, again, to prove to the beekeepers how effective is that one. And the third one, 3-day sticky boards. And at this time, actually, we have 60 hives involved in this research. Keep in mind, some of this research was done in 1980s, and it's never been updated until now. 30 years after the fact, once we got the mites, there's some information developed, but it's never been revisited and recalculated. At this time, I will say yes, the mites per day equivalent to 3% mites in the bees.
Okay, next question. What's your opinion by thermal treatment using heat shots to the bees up to 42 Celsius to drop off the varroa on the board sheet? Of course, after taking the queen out.
It's a good idea. Let me ask you a question. I came from Egypt, and actually, it's quite interesting one thing. In that part of the world right now, the temperature is about 45 Celsius. Did we get rid of the mites? No. They still have to use also some treatment for the mites. So in reality, 45 Celsius. This idea is very old idea actually in 1970s, and it was done in Russia. And actually, they put all the bees in a heater. And when I was visiting the Ukraine, there's a museum down there, which was part of Russia at the time, and they have that machine. It's almost like roasting a pig. And they put the bees inside and they keep cranking it and to get the mites out. And later on, they take the bees back to the hive. That was really good idea. What happened if by accident the temperature went above 45? Now we have the technology, we have the solar, and we can do that stuff. Guess what? The bees can get out of the hive because it's not comfortable temperature and will cluster in front of the hive. What I'm going to do with that? I'm still trying to get my head around the whole concept. I know it can really drop the mites and the bees will survive, but how can you confine the bees inside the hive to get the mites down and the bees still comfortable and stay alive? I kind of in a way, uh, I said, research is always good. It can give us results, and maybe there's a breakthrough through the technology. And I'm watching and reading about it, and I hope someday I can change my mind.
Well, we have another question that I think it says that are all dead colonies due to the existence of Varroa?
No, not really. That's not really. That's not true. It's kind of interesting. The first culprit, always and easy to point to, is Varroa mites. We have some colonies actually they die sometimes for the queenless or queen quality. We have some colonies. We have some beekeepers actually due to high winter kill, they split more colonies and make some other colonies. And these colonies are not really prepared with the bee population and the size to go through the winter. So that colony is out. We have some Nizima, we have some AFB. The it's really quite interesting to have the records which it can help the beekeepers to understand what happened in their colonies. And frankly, we start to see some beekeepers understand I lost my bees for Varroa, and that's because I lost about 10% of my colonies, and that's because recently we did some research in Saskatchewan, and we monitor queens uh, produced locally and imported. And we found some queens actually they have no semen. And now you put it in the hive in the fall and you think that colony will survive through the winter, but actually it is not. So that's where the beekeepers management and records will show exactly what's happening out there. So I wouldn't really put the mites all the time as the bad guy. Actually, uh, there's more than that.
Okay, so let me share with you probably the last question. We have others, but I think we are running out of time. So it's a very scientific one. So maybe you have the cue, you have the answer to that, but it seems very interesting. So do you think the altering of plant genetics play into how bees decide which plants to forage at and ultimate pollinate? Do these genetically modified plants draw pollinators away from other plants that become less favorable to visit? I don't know if you have the answer, but you know it's really a nice question. Definitely, if not, we have to dig a little bit more on that.
Yeah, just a quick thing here. As I mentioned, we have about 22 million acres of canola. It's all of it monoculture, and actually, there's no such weed developed because they have their own technology and try to make sure the whole area right now, if you fly over the prairies, yellow carbon. Um, they are good for the bees, good for the honey crop, and good for the production of canola. Uh, Definitely, there's always competition between what's out there and the canola. But two things here: we haven't seen really any negative impact of GMO on the bees themselves. The only impact we have only one season because the farmers already been drawn into growing more canola more than any other crops. We have some areas still that have uh, diverse cropping systems, and they have alfalfa, they have clover. So the bees can adjust themselves, and this is where the beekeeper management actually will help. We know in some areas there's pollen supplement will should be added to encourage the bees to develop because we have dearth periods. Other areas actually they don't require those ones because the bees already have access to more pollen from other crops other than canola, and they can develop in their own. So this is kind of in a way I call it. It depends on the location and the environment and what kind of crops out there.
Okay, thanks a lot for your explanation. It has been a true pleasure to have you driving this BTune conference. I think your ability to communicate your experience in beekeeping is truly appreciated. I also want to thank everyone for joining us, and we hope you all enjoy the webinar. So thanks a lot, and thanks for taking the time to share your experience with us, Medhat.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.